It all began when I lost my job. The local economy in Detroit was collapsing, and I was left with no choice but to look for options out of state. Eventually I found one, a computer repair store in Michigan, but that meant the added hassle of moving. To cut a long story short, there was a 10-day period where I had sold my Detroit apartment, and the lease on my Michigan place didn't start until the next month. So to tie over, I booked a local apartment on rent for a week, with a similar arrangement as a guest house. The night before I was about to undertake the road trip, I got an email from the apartment manager. "Mr. Franklin, before you are here, I would like to warn you that the roads are not the best at this time of the year, and there might be some rather odd-looking creatures you end up seeing during your drive up here. I do hope you find the apartment comfortable and to your liking." I did remember thinking it was a rather strange email to send to a potential customer, almost as if he was trying to dissuade me from coming there. But needs must, and I really needed a place to stay for that 1 week. The morning dawned, and it was rather bleak and gloomy, with clouds hanging in the sky. The first hour of the drive was pleasant, as I avoided the early morning rush of city traffic. But soon enough, the apartments and stores gave way to dark, woody trees on both sides of the road. For around 15 minutes, I was the only person on that stretch of road, with the only sound coming from the low hum of my car. It was then that I heard it for the first time. I couldn't quite place the sound, but it was somewhere between a wolf's howl and a baby's scream. I had no idea where the sound was coming from, but it had to be pretty close by. Though not yet gripped by fear, I was a bit unsettled. So I pulled over the car to the side of the road, just underneath a tall, wooded tree, and turned the ignition off. I waited to see if I could hear that sound again, but the next couple of minutes were very quiet. Then my ears picked up the sound of footsteps, rustling from somewhere within the woods. I stayed in my stationary car, my heart beating just a little bit quicker than before. Then came the first sighting. Within the dark woods, I saw something moving rapidly. It was too far away to guess at what it was, except that it was not like any animal I remember hearing about. Its sheer size took my breath away for a moment. Within 5 seconds, it disappeared, like it was never there. It was close to evening now, and the last thing I wanted was to be stuck in these wooded roads with that creature, whatever it was, for company. I took a swig of water from my flask, steadied my nerves, and pressed on the accelerator. I reached that apartment within another hour, and it was in an extremely secluded spot, away from all of civilization. I might as well have been the last person on Earth. As soon as I had turned off the ignition, however, I heard a sound that chilled my bones. A sound that sounded somewhere between a howl and a screaming baby. Had the creature followed me all this time? How close was it this time? Was my mind playing tricks on me? Mustering whatever courage I had, I stepped out of the car as quietly as I could. My senses were on high alert now, and I got the inexplicable feeling that something or someone was watching me. Without warning, I whipped around, and this time I did manage to see something that looked like a tail. An extremely bushy tail with jet black colored fur. So there was definite evidence then. I was not alone. I made my way to the apartment, taking care to lock it as securely as possible. The manager was right. It was well furnished and extremely cozy. I also couldn't help thinking back to the other part of his email. What exactly did he mean by odd-looking creatures? Was he aware of this thing, and was the email just a coded warning? I had lots of questions but barely any answers, and the drive had been tiring, not to mention terrifying in parts. I could sense my eyes closing. The sound of claw marks, and something scratching at the window. Was I actually awake, or was this all a really bad dream? What really woke me up were the eyes. Not burning red, as my brain would have imagined. Rather, it was a very icy blue, and they seemed to be staring past the glass and into my very soul. Almost like it was watching me sleep. There was no anger in those eyes, just curiosity. I screamed, and it vanished. Just like that. It took me a couple of hours to calm myself down. It had only been half a day, but there was no way I could stay on in this place. Not with that thing, that creature from hell, running around. But going out in the dark was also out of the question, so I planned to just sit the night out and leave at first light the next morning. Shutting down all the lights in the apartment, I plugged my phone into a socket and sat there, with just the flashlight on. It must have been sometime after midnight when I heard that sound again. The wolf-like howl and the scream of a baby. But I knew now it was the creature. It must have been extremely close by, possibly just outside the windows, waiting for me to come out. Around 3 in the night, I could hear it again. It was moving around, circling the apartment. A soft rustle outside the window again, and I turned my eyes. It took all my strength to not scream. I did not know what this creature was, but it was not something from this world. Around 7 feet tall when standing up, it had a hairy torso with coarse, jet black fur that shone in the dark. From the waist, however, it had the hairy lower limbs of a human. It was not a dog and it was not a man, but rather a demonic mixture of the two. It stared unblinkingly at me with those icy blue eyes, as if daring me to come outside. Eventually, after what seemed like an eternity, but was in fact just a few minutes, it slunk away. Twice more in the night, I could hear it screaming. The next morning, I crept out of the apartment as silently as I could. To my immense relief, my car was still there, unscratched and unbroken. As soon as I entered the driver's seat and turned on the ignition, I could hear the rustle of footsteps. And even without looking back, I knew it was the creature. It seemed like it wanted to chase me, like a game of hunter and prey. Well, I was not going to be the prey. Not today. I slammed on the accelerator, and within 15 seconds I was on the road. I could see it in my rearview mirror, just loping along on its long limbs. The seconds passed, then minutes. I kept on driving, trying to keep a steady heartbeat. It was still there, and on occasion, I could have sworn I saw it baring its gritted, yellow teeth. It seemed to be grinning, but not maliciously. After an hour and a half, I had just turned into the city. The woods were finally behind me, when I realized that my rearview mirror was clear. I had no idea when exactly the creature had stopped chasing me, but I was very glad that it had. Eventually, I called up an old friend who still lived in the city and crashed at his place for a week. It's been 2 decades since that night and that drive, and sometimes I still have nightmares about a 7 feet tall creature with icy blue eyes. I haven't told a soul, and I don't know if I ever will. It sounds a tale too far-fetched to be true. But I do know what I saw, and I do know I was fully aware of my senses.